Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
One question changed everything. What if I told you that the most important word I ever learned in English was not love, not family, and not even home? What if a single question changed the direction of my life forever? Have you ever felt that your heart understood something long before your mind could explain it? If you are learning English slowly, one story at a time, stay with me until the end of this video. Because what happened to me in America still surprises me every single day. And the ending of this first chapter is only the beginning of something far bigger than I ever imagined. My name is Emma, and this is my true story. I live in the United States, where every day feels familiar and unexpected at the same time. Mornings begin with fresh coffee, quiet streets, neighbors walking their dogs, and children laughing as school buses stop at every corner. It looks like an ordinary American neighborhood, the kind you might see in movies. Yet behind one ordinary afternoon, my entire future quietly waited for me without making a sound. I have always loved simple English. Not perfect English. Not difficult English. Just slow, clear English that lets every word breathe. Every evening, I read short stories aloud to myself. Sometimes I repeated one sentence 5 or 6 times. Love is patient. Kindness is powerful. Every family has a story. Those little sentences were easy to understand, but I never imagined one of them would become my own life. People often think happiness arrives with fireworks. Mine arrived in complete silence. One Saturday, I visited a community family event at a local cultural center. There were music performances, homemade food, children's games, and families from many different backgrounds. America is full of different languages, different traditions, and different faces, yet somehow everyone can smile in exactly the same language. As I walked through the crowd, I noticed something unusual. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, stood beside a table covered with colorful drawings. She wasn't calling anyone over. She wasn't asking for attention. She simply smiled at every person who looked her way. There was something peaceful about her smile, something impossible to explain. I smiled back. She handed me a drawing without saying a word. On the paper was a simple picture of 3 people holding hands beneath a bright blue sky. Above them, written in careful English letters, were only 4 words. Love has no borders. I froze. The sentence was grammatically simple. Any beginner learning English could understand it. Yet somehow it felt heavier than every book I had ever read. I thanked her, but before I could ask her name, another volunteer gently called her away. She disappeared into the crowd. I stood there holding a child's drawing that suddenly felt more valuable than anything I had ever owned. For the rest of the afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about those 4 words. That night, I placed the drawing on my kitchen table. I made dinner. I watched television. I tried reading another English story. But every few minutes my eyes returned to that picture. Love has no borders. Why did those words refuse to leave my mind? Psychologists often explain that our brains remember emotionally meaningful moments more strongly than ordinary events. When emotion and curiosity meet at the same time, memory becomes deeper. Maybe that is exactly what happened to me. Or maybe something far greater had quietly started. Before going to bed, I turned the paper over. I expected to see nothing. Instead, I found a handwritten note that changed everything. It contained only one short sentence. If you knew my story, would you still believe love has no borders? I didn't sleep much that night. Because the next morning, I decided I had to find that little girl again. I had absolutely no idea that searching for her would soon lead me to the most life-changing decision I would ever make. Looking for the girl nobody could find. The strange part was not that I wanted to find the little girl again. The strange part was that everyone I asked seemed to remember her smile, but almost nobody remembered her name. Have you ever searched for someone who appeared for only a few minutes but somehow stayed in your heart for weeks? That was exactly how I felt. I thought I was chasing a simple answer. Instead, I was walking toward a story that would completely change how I understood family, love, and even the simple English words I practiced every evening. The next morning, I returned to the same community center much earlier than the event had started the day before. The parking lot was almost empty. Volunteers were carrying tables, arranging chairs, and hanging colorful banners. Everything looked perfectly normal, yet my heart beat much faster than it should have. I showed the drawing to one volunteer. She smiled politely. "Oh, that's beautiful," she said. "But do you know who drew it?" I asked. She looked at it again, paused for a second, and slowly shook her head. "I've seen many children here. I'm sorry." The answer disappointed me, but I refused to give up. One volunteer suggested I speak with the event coordinator, a cheerful woman named Sarah. She had organized family programs for years and seemed to know almost everyone in the neighborhood. When she looked at the drawing, something changed in her expression. "I think I've seen this handwriting before," she whispered. My heart skipped a beat. She walked toward a small office, searched through several folders, then returned with a thoughtful smile. "I can't share private information," she explained gently. "But I can tell you that the little girl participated in a family support program." Family support program. Those 3 words stayed in my mind. I thanked Sarah and walked outside. Children were laughing on the playground. Parents were talking while holding coffee cups. A young father pushed his son on a swing. A grandmother helped her granddaughter ride a tiny bicycle. It was another ordinary American weekend, full of simple moments that many people hardly notice. I suddenly realized something. Families do not all begin the same way. Some grow through birth. Some grow through marriage. Some grow through friendship. And some begin because one person decides another person should never feel alone again. That afternoon, I sat on a park bench and practiced reading the sentence from the drawing aloud. Love has no borders. I repeated it slowly. Again. And again. Reading English this way helped me notice every word, every pause, every emotion. I smiled because learning English no longer felt like studying. It felt like listening to someone's heart. A recent psychology study suggested that emotional storytelling helps people remember new vocabulary more naturally than memorizing word lists. I believed it immediately. I still remembered every word from that drawing without making any effort at all. Just as I prepared to leave, my phone rang. It was Sarah. I found something, she said. There will be a small family volunteer gathering tomorrow evening. She might be there. Might? I asked. Sarah hesitated. I can't promise. The next evening felt longer than an entire week. I arrived early once again. People slowly filled the room. Families greeted one another. Children ran between tables. Every time the door opened, I looked up. Not her. Another family entered. Still not her. Then, almost an hour later, the room suddenly became quiet. A woman walked in holding the hand of the little girl I had been searching for. Our eyes met immediately. She smiled exactly the same way. Then she recognized me. Without saying a single word, she reached into her small backpack, pulled out another folded piece of paper, and quietly placed it into my hands. Before I could unfold it, the woman beside her looked directly at me and softly said, I think it's finally time you hear her whole story. The story hidden inside one piece of paper. Have you ever held something so small that it fit inside your hand, yet felt heavy enough to change your entire future? At that moment, the folded piece of paper seemed to weigh more than anything I had ever carried. I had spent days searching for one little girl, believing I wanted answers. I was wrong. What I was about to discover would challenge everything I believed about family, kindness, and the invisible connections that quietly shape our lives. And before that evening ended, would hear a question I could never forget. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the paper. The little girl stood beside the woman, watching me with calm eyes that seemed far older than her age. Around us, families continued chatting, children laughed over board games, and soft music played through the speakers. The room was full of life, but for me, everything became perfectly quiet. Written in careful, simple English were only a few short sentences. My name is Lily. I like drawing. I dream about having a forever family. If someone chooses me, I will love them forever. I read the words twice. Then a third time. They were easy English sentences, the kind every beginner could understand. Yet every word carried an emotion that no grammar lesson could ever teach. I looked at Lily. She smiled nervously. The woman beside her introduced herself as Rachel, a licensed family support counselor who worked with children waiting for permanent homes. She spoke gently, never rushing her words, almost as if she knew every sentence needed time to settle into my heart. Lily asked if she could write notes instead of introducing herself. Rachel explained. Writing makes her feel brave. I could understand that feeling. Sometimes speaking English out loud had frightened me too. Reading first, then speaking slowly, had always given me confidence. In that unexpected moment, I realized Lily and I shared something simple but meaningful. We both believed words could build courage. Rachel invited me to sit at a nearby table while Lily quietly colored another picture. She explained that many children in the United States spend time in foster care while adults work hard to find safe, loving, permanent families. Every child's story is different. Some eventually return to relatives. Others are adopted. Every situation is unique, and every decision is made with the child's best interests in mind. As I listened, I noticed Lily looking toward us every few seconds. Not because she wanted attention. Because she wanted hope. Rachel smiled softly. She loves drawing families. I glanced across the table. Every picture showed smiling people holding hands beneath bright skies. Some had dogs. Some had gardens. Some had balloons. Every single drawing had one thing in common. Nobody was standing alone. I felt my chest tighten. Psychologists often say that children express emotions through art long before they can explain them with complex language. Looking at Lily's drawings, I didn't need research to understand. Every picture quietly whispered the same dream. Belonging. After a few minutes, Lily walked over carrying a fresh drawing. "This one is for you," she said. Her voice was almost a whisper. The picture showed two people sitting on a park bench reading a book together. Above them she had carefully written, "We can learn together." I smiled. "That's beautiful." She looked at me with complete sincerity. "Do you like reading English?" I laughed softly. "I do." She grinned. "So do I. Slow English is easier." For the first time that evening, we both laughed. It felt effortless. Natural. As if we had known each other much longer than a few minutes. Rachel watched us quietly before speaking again. "There is something you should know." Her tone became serious. "Lily wasn't planning to give you that first drawing." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Rachel reached into a folder and gently placed another document on the table. The person she originally made it for never came. I stared at the folder. Then at Lily. Then back at Rachel. Rachel took a slow breath before saying the sentence that made my heart stop. "The family who had planned to meet Lily changed their minds only 24 hours before you walked into that community event." The question I was afraid to answer. Have you ever realized that one conversation can quietly divide your life into two parts, everything before it, and everything after it? That was exactly what happened to me. I thought I had come to hear Lily's story. Instead, I found myself facing a question I had carefully avoided my entire life. The surprising part was not that someone asked me to help. The surprising part was that my own heart answered before my mind had time to think, and that frightened me more than anything else. I left the community center later than I expected. The evening air was cool, and the streets were peaceful. Families were heading home after dinner, porch lights glowed across the neighborhood, and somewhere in the distance I could hear children laughing. Everything around me looked completely normal, yet inside my head, nothing felt the same. The family changed their minds. Rachel's words kept repeating. I tried to imagine Lily sitting with her drawing, waiting for people she believed would arrive. I wondered how many times she had smiled with hope, only to carry disappointment home instead. That thought stayed with me long after I reached my house. I placed both drawings on my kitchen table. The first one read, "Love has no borders." The second one read, "We can learn together." I stared at them while making tea. Without realizing it, I whispered both sentences aloud several times. Speaking slowly has always helped me improve my English pronunciation. This time, however, I wasn't practicing vocabulary. I was trying to understand my own feelings. Love. Borders. Together. Simple words. Complicated emotions. The next morning, while walking through my neighborhood park, I noticed something I had somehow overlooked for years. America is full of different kinds of families. Some parents pushed strollers with newborn babies. One father walked hand in hand with his teenage son. A grandmother chased two energetic twins across the grass. Nearby, a couple laughed while teaching their young daughter how to ride a bicycle without training wheels. None of them looked exactly alike. None of them needed to. Family was beginning to look much bigger than biology. Later that afternoon, Rachel called and invited me for coffee. She wanted to answer any questions I might have about foster care, adoption, and the support available for children and families. There was no pressure in her voice. Only kindness. We met at a quiet cafe overlooking a small public square. As we talked, Rachel explained that every adoption story is unique. Some children are adopted as infants. Others are older. Some arrive from different states, while others come from different countries. Every situation involves careful legal steps, emotional preparation, professional guidance, and a deep commitment to the child's well-being. I listened carefully. Then I asked the question that had been growing inside me all night. Does Lily know that family canceled? Rachel looked down at her coffee before answering. She knows they didn't come. That answer hurt more than I expected. Children often understand much more than adults imagine. Psychologists explain that children are remarkably sensitive to changes in routine, facial expressions, and emotional signals. Even when adults try to protect them from disappointment, children often recognize it anyway. Lily may not have known every detail, but she had certainly noticed the empty chair. Rachel reached into her bag and handed me a small booklet about family support programs. I thanked her and slipped it into my purse without opening it. Before we stood up to leave, Rachel smiled. Lily asked me something yesterday. I looked up immediately. What did she ask? Rachel's expression became unexpectedly serious. She wanted to know if you would come back. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Then Rachel quietly added the sentence I never saw coming. I told her I didn't know. Because I wasn't sure whether you were simply touched by her story, or whether you were already becoming part of it. The decision that scared me most. What if the biggest obstacle between you and the life you were meant to live was not fear of failure, but fear of saying yes? That question followed me everywhere after my conversation with Rachel. I kept telling myself I was only interested in Lily's story. But deep inside, another truth was quietly growing. Every time I tried to walk away, life seemed to place another small reminder in front of me. Looking back now, I don't believe those moments were accidents at all. For several days, I carried the family support booklet in my bag without opening it. I convinced myself I was too busy. Work filled my weekdays, grocery shopping filled my evenings, and weekend errands gave me endless excuses. Yet every night, before going to bed, I found myself looking again at Lily's two drawings resting on my bookshelf. Love has no borders. We can learn together. Those simple sentences had become part of my daily routine. One rainy Saturday afternoon, I finally opened the booklet. Inside were stories about families from different backgrounds who had welcomed children into their homes through adoption. Every journey was different. Some families grew quickly. Others waited for years. Each story spoke honestly about paperwork, emotional preparation, home studies, conversations with counselors, and learning how trust is built one day at a time. Nothing sounded easy, but none of it sounded impossible either. One sentence stayed with me. A child does not need a perfect family. A child needs a committed one. I read it aloud several times, just as I often practiced my English reading. Speaking slowly helped me hear every word clearly. Commitment. Patience. Belonging. These were not difficult vocabulary words, yet they carried extraordinary meaning. Research in child development often shows that stable, caring relationships play one of the most important roles in helping children develop confidence, emotional security, and resilience. Reading that reminded me that love is not measured by dramatic moments. It grows through ordinary mornings, shared meals, bedtime stories, and simply showing up again and again. That evening, I called Rachel. "I've been reading," I admitted. "I hoped you would," she replied warmly. We spoke for nearly an hour. She carefully explained that exploring adoption did not mean making an immediate decision. There were educational sessions, background checks, interviews, training programs, and many opportunities to ask difficult questions. The entire process existed to support both the child and the future family. There was no pressure. Only honesty. After hanging up, I felt strangely peaceful. Not because I had all the answers. Because I finally allowed myself to ask the right questions. The following week, Rachel invited me to attend an informational family workshop at the community center. Several couples, single parents, and experienced adoptive families gathered to share their experiences. I expected formal presentations. Instead, I found laughter, honesty, and stories that felt surprisingly ordinary. One father smiled as he said, "The paperwork was exhausting. Learning how to make pancakes for 3 hungry kids was much harder." The room burst into laughter. For the first time, adoption stopped feeling like a distant idea and started feeling like real family life. As the meeting ended, people slowly gathered their coats and headed toward the exit. I stayed behind for a moment. Across the room, I noticed Lily sitting quietly at a small table with crayons scattered around her. She looked up. Our eyes met. Without hesitation, she walked over and handed me one more drawing. This one was different. There were no colorful balloons. No bright sunshine. Just 2 empty chairs beneath a large tree. At the bottom, written in careful English, were 6 words that completely stole my breath. "I saved 1 seat for you." At that exact moment, Rachel gently touched my shoulder and whispered something I had never expected to hear. "Tomorrow, Lily's case will be presented to a matching committee, and your name is already being discussed." The day everything became real. Have you ever wished time would slow down, only to discover that the moment you feared the most was also the one you had been waiting for all along? That was exactly how I felt the morning after Rachel whispered those unbelievable words. My name had been mentioned. Not as a visitor, Not as a volunteer, but as someone who might become part of Lily's future. I barely slept that night, and when the sun finally rose over my quiet American neighborhood, I knew nothing in my life would ever feel ordinary again. The drive to the family services office felt much longer than usual. Traffic moved slowly, coffee shops filled with people starting another normal weekday, and school buses stopped at familiar corners. Everyone else seemed to be living an ordinary Tuesday. For me, every traffic light felt like another heartbeat. Rachel greeted me with her usual calm smile. "You don't have to know every answer today," she said. "You only have to be honest." Those words immediately lifted some of the weight from my shoulders. The meeting wasn't an interview the way I had imagined. It was a conversation. The counselors asked about my daily routines, my support system, my work-life balance, and how I handled challenges. They wanted to understand who I really was, not who I thought they wanted me to become. One counselor smiled when she noticed a notebook sticking out of my bag. "Do you enjoy writing?" I laughed softly. "I practice English every evening." She seemed curious. "What do you write?" "Simple sentences," I answered. "Sometimes I describe my day. Sometimes I write about gratitude. Reading them aloud helps me improve my English." She nodded with genuine interest. "That's a wonderful habit." At that moment, I realized something unexpected. Learning English had quietly prepared me for this conversation. Speaking slowly taught me patience. Reading carefully taught me to listen. Searching for the right words taught me that honesty matters more than perfection. The counselors explained that successful adoption isn't about creating a perfect family. Research consistently shows that children thrive in environments where caregivers provide emotional consistency, responsive communication, and dependable routines. Trust grows through everyday moments, sharing breakfast, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, and simply being present. Those ordinary moments suddenly sounded extraordinary. After the meeting, Rachel invited me to visit the children's activity room before heading home. Lily was sitting on the floor building a tall tower from colorful wooden blocks. When she saw me, her face lit up. "You came back," she said. "I promised myself I would." She smiled proudly and pointed at the tower. "It's a family." I looked closer. There were blocks of different colors, different sizes, and different shapes. "They don't match," I joked gently. "They don't have to," she answered without hesitation. Her reply stayed with me. Sometimes children understand life's greatest truths better than adults. We spent the next hour reading a short children's picture book together. Every page contained easy English sentences. "I see a bird." "The sky is blue." "We are together." Whenever Lily struggled with a word, we sounded it out slowly together. Whenever I mispronounced something, she giggled and corrected me with complete confidence. For the first time in years, practicing English didn't feel like studying. It felt like building trust one sentence at a time. As I prepared to leave, Lily quietly slipped something into my hand. It was a tiny friendship bracelet made from blue and yellow string. "I made it for my forever person," she whispered. My eyes immediately filled with tears. Before I could respond, Rachel gently approached us. She looked at the bracelet. Then she looked at me. "The committee has finished today's meeting," she said softly. My heart almost stopped. I searched her face, trying to guess the answer before she spoke. Rachel smiled. "It's good news." I felt the entire room disappear. Then she carefully added one more sentence that changed everything again. "They've approved the next step. But before anything can move forward, there's one important person you still haven't met, and that meeting could change the entire outcome." The one person I never expected. What if the biggest surprise in this story wasn't Lily, wasn't the adoption process, and wasn't even me? What if everything depended on one person I had never met, someone whose opinion could quietly reshape every plan I had begun to imagine? I walked into that next meeting believing I was one step closer to becoming a family. I had no idea I was also about to discover a hidden piece of Lily's life that explained why she smiled so brightly, even after experiencing so much disappointment. Rachel asked me to meet her at a small family resource center on the other side of town. It was a bright spring afternoon in the United States. Cherry trees were beginning to bloom, children were playing baseball in a nearby park, and families filled the sidewalks with bicycles, strollers, and picnic baskets. Everything around me celebrated new beginnings, but inside my mind, questions raced faster than my heartbeat. When I arrived, Rachel greeted me warmly. "Someone wants to meet you," she said. She led me into a quiet room where an older woman was arranging children's books on a shelf. She wore a soft blue sweater and smiled with the calm confidence of someone who had spent years comforting worried families. "This is Margaret," Rachel said. "She has known Lily longer than anyone on our team." Margaret shook my hand gently. "I've heard wonderful things about you." I smiled nervously. "I hope they're true." She laughed. "I think we're about to find out." We sat together for nearly 2 hours. Margaret didn't ask whether I had enough space in my home or whether I could cook healthy meals. Those practical questions had already been answered. Instead, she wanted to understand something much deeper. "What do you think makes a family?" she asked. The question sounded simple. The answer wasn't. After a long pause, I finally spoke. "I think family is choosing each other every single day." Margaret smiled but didn't interrupt. I continued. "It's showing up when life isn't easy. Listening before judging. Staying when leaving would be simpler." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Margaret quietly nodded. "Lily says almost the same thing." That sentence caught me completely off guard. I looked at her in surprise. "She does?" Margaret reached into a folder filled with children's artwork and carefully removed a small notebook. "Lily has kept a journal during her reading sessions." She opened to one page and pointed toward a short sentence written in careful English. "A family stays." Only 3 words. But somehow they carried an entire childhood inside them. Margaret explained that reading and writing often help children express emotions they struggle to say aloud. Developmental psychologists have long observed that storytelling allows children to organize difficult experiences into meaningful memories while building resilience and confidence. Listening to Lily's written words, I understood that every simple sentence revealed extraordinary courage. Margaret handed me the notebook. You can read one page. I carefully turned to the next entry. My favorite day is when someone comes back. I had to stop reading. My vision blurred with tears. Without realizing it, I whispered the sentence aloud. My favorite day is when someone comes back. Practicing slow English had never felt so personal. Every word mattered. Every pause mattered. Every feeling mattered. Margaret looked at me kindly. Children notice consistency more than promises. That lesson stayed with me. Before leaving, she walked me toward the parking lot. I'd like to ask you one last question, she said. I nodded. If this process becomes longer than you expect, will you still keep showing up? I answered without hesitation. Yes. For the first time, Margaret's eyes filled with emotion. I was hoping you'd say that. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Then my phone rang. It was Rachel. Her voice sounded excited, but also unusually serious. I just received an unexpected call. What happened? I asked. There was a brief silence. Then she spoke the words that made me pull my car safely to the side of the road. Lily's international adoption history has just revealed something no one realized before, and it changes the entire story. The secret hidden in Lily's past. What if everything you believed about this story suddenly became only half the truth? Just when I thought I finally understood Lily's journey, one unexpected phone call uncovered a forgotten chapter that no one had ever explained to me. It wasn't a dramatic mystery from a movie. It was something far more powerful, something real. And when I learned the truth, I finally understood why one little girl had always written the same words over and over again: love has no borders. I sat quietly in my parked car while Rachel explained what had happened. During a routine review of Lily's records, a recently updated document had been added to her file. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't bad news either. It was simply information that had never reached everyone involved in her case. Lily was born outside the United States, Rachel said gently. For a moment, I didn't answer. I looked through my windshield at families walking across the street, children holding balloons, and neighbors greeting one another with easy smiles. Life around me continued exactly as before, but inside my heart, everything shifted. Rachel continued. Lily entered the United States through an international child welfare process several years ago. Since then, every legal step has focused on finding the safest, most stable permanent family for her. Suddenly, the sentence from her drawing made complete sense. Love has no borders. She hadn't written those words because they sounded beautiful. She had lived them. Over the following week, Rachel invited me to another educational meeting. This session focused on children who come from different cultural backgrounds and how families can help them grow with confidence while honoring every part of their identity. The conversation fascinated me. Experts explained that children adopted across cultures benefit when families celebrate both their present lives and their cultural heritage. Maintaining curiosity, asking respectful questions, and creating opportunities to learn together help children develop a strong sense of identity and belonging. I filled pages of notes. Not because anyone expected me to memorize information, Because I genuinely wanted to become the kind of adult who deserved a child's trust. That evening, I stopped by the public library on my way home. I borrowed several simple English children's books from different cultures. Some stories included familiar American traditions. Others introduced festivals, foods, songs, and family customs from around the world. As always, I read them aloud. Slowly. Clearly. One sentence caught my attention. Our stories may begin in different places, but kindness speaks every language. I smiled. It sounded exactly like something Lily would believe. A few days later, I visited the family center again. Lily was waiting with a globe sitting on the table. She spun it carefully. When it stopped, she pointed at different countries with tiny fingers. So many homes, she whispered. Then she looked at me. Do you think love gets lost when it crosses oceans? I felt tears forming before I even realized it. No, I answered softly. I think love becomes even stronger when someone keeps carrying it. She smiled in that quiet, peaceful way I remembered from the very first day we met. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out another drawing. This picture was different from all the others. Instead of one family beneath one sky, she had drawn children holding hands across continents. Above them she carefully printed one simple English sentence. We all belong somewhere. I looked at the picture for a long time. Not because the drawing was perfect. Because the message was. Just before I left, Rachel approached with an envelope in her hands. Her smile told me something important had happened. The committee reviewed every recommendation, she said. My heart immediately began racing again. She handed me the sealed envelope. This contains the next official decision. I stared at it. I could hear my own breathing. Lily looked at me with hopeful eyes. My fingers slowly reached for the edge of the envelope. I opened it. Then I read the very first line. What it said made me completely forget where I was standing, because it wasn't the answer I had been expecting at all. The answer I never saw coming. What if the moment you have been waiting for doesn't give you a final answer, but asks one last question instead? I believed the envelope in my hands would decide everything. I imagined reading either yes or no. Life rarely works that way. Sometimes the most important door opens only after you prove that your heart is ready to walk through it. When I unfolded that letter, I realized my greatest challenge had never been paperwork. It was learning what love truly asks from us. I took a slow breath before reading the first page. The committee had reviewed every report, every recommendation, every interview, and every training session. They appreciated my commitment, my consistency, and the positive relationship I had developed with Lily. Then I reached the sentence that surprised me. The committee recommends moving forward with an extended family transition period. I looked up at Rachel. I don't understand. She smiled reassuringly. It means they believe the connection between you and Lily is promising. Promising. Not finished. Not guaranteed. Just beginning. The next several weeks became the most meaningful weeks of my life. Instead of rushing toward a destination, we were encouraged to build trust naturally. We spent afternoons reading books at the library, walking through neighborhood parks, baking cookies, visiting museums, and laughing over simple board games. Nothing about those days looked extraordinary from the outside. Yet everything about them quietly transformed us. One afternoon, while we were making homemade pancakes together, Lily accidentally spilled flour across the kitchen counter. She froze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. For a second, I wondered why such a small mistake frightened her so much. Then I smiled, picked up another bowl, and gently sprinkled a little flour on my own shirt. "Now we're even." She stared at me. Then she burst into laughter so hard that she could barely stand. That sound filled the entire kitchen. Researchers who study child attachment often explain that emotional safety grows through predictable, caring responses during everyday situations. A calm reaction after a small mistake teaches children something powerful. Love doesn't disappear when life becomes messy. That afternoon, I think both of us learned exactly that. Our English practice also became part of our routine. Every evening we read one short story together. Sometimes Lily read first. Sometimes I did. Whenever one of us struggled with a word, the other patiently helped. One evening we reached a sentence that simply said, "Home is where love stays." Lily closed the book. "I like that one," she whispered. "So do I." She thought quietly for a moment. Then she asked the question I wasn't prepared for. "Can I tell people you're my almost mom?" My eyes immediately filled with tears. I knelt beside her. "You can tell people we're building something very special." She smiled. "I like that answer better." As the transition weeks continued, our routines became wonderfully ordinary. Saturday pancakes. Sunday library visits. Evening walks. Slow English reading before bedtime. Some people search their whole lives for extraordinary happiness, only to discover it was hiding inside ordinary moments all along. Several days later, Rachel invited me back to the family services office. "This is the final review meeting," she explained. My heart pounded exactly as it had on the very first day. The counselors smiled as I entered. One by one, they shared observations from the past several weeks. Consistency. Patience. Trust. Emotional connection. Each word felt like another quiet step toward becoming a family. Finally, the lead counselor closed the folder. "We're ready." I could hardly breathe. Rachel reached across the table and gently placed one final document in front of me. "This is the recommendation for permanent adoption approval." Before I could celebrate, the counselor added one unexpected sentence. "There is only one final step left." I looked up immediately. "What is it?" She smiled warmly. "You need to hear Lily's answer first." At that exact moment, the office door slowly opened. And Lily walked in holding something behind her back that neither Rachel nor I had ever seen before. Love never needed borders. What if the happiest ending isn't really an ending at all? What if the greatest miracle doesn't arrive with loud applause but with one quiet sentence that changes two lives forever? If you've stayed with me until this moment, thank you. Because what happened next became the most unforgettable chapter of my life in America. It taught me that family is not created by matching faces, shared DNA, or the place where someone is born. Family begins the moment two hearts decide they will never stop choosing each other. The office became completely silent as Lily slowly walked toward me. She was smiling, but I could see she was nervous. Both of her hands were hidden behind her back. Rachel gave her an encouraging nod. "You can tell her whenever you're ready." Lily took one small step closer. Then another. Finally, she brought her hands forward. She was holding the very first drawing she had ever given me. The paper had been carefully laminated. The words were still there. Love has no borders. But this time, something was different. Beneath the original sentence, she had written one more line in neat, careful English. "Now I know where home is." I couldn't hold back my tears. Neither could Rachel. Neither could anyone else in the room. Lily looked at me with the same gentle smile that had first captured my heart months earlier. Then she quietly asked, "Would you like to keep choosing me?" I knelt beside her without saying a word. Then I hugged her. Every single day. Those 3 words were all she needed. She wrapped her little arms around me and whispered something so softly that only I could hear it. "I've been waiting for you." There are moments in life that seem almost too ordinary to become unforgettable. A quiet room. A child's drawing. A simple hug. Yet psychologists often explain that secure emotional bonds are built through consistent experiences of safety, acceptance, and unconditional care. Looking back, I realized our family had not been created in one dramatic moment. It had been built slowly, through books we read together, pancakes we accidentally burned, walks through neighborhood parks, laughter over difficult English words, and the promise that neither of us would stop showing up. Several weeks later, the adoption became official. Friends from our community gathered to celebrate. There were balloons, homemade desserts, photographs, and far too many happy tears. Someone asked Lily what her favorite part of the whole journey had been. I expected her to mention the celebration. Or the gifts. Or finally having a forever home. Instead, she smiled and answered, "Reading together." Everyone laughed gently. She looked at me. When we read slowly, nobody has to hurry. I still think about those words every time I open a book. Learning English was never only about vocabulary. It became a way to build patience. To practice listening. To understand another person's heart one sentence at a time. Even today, our evenings often end exactly the same way. We sit together on the couch with a simple English storybook. Sometimes I read. Sometimes Lily reads. Sometimes we both stop halfway through a page because one of us starts laughing. Those ordinary moments have become my favorite part of every day. Whenever people ask me why so many families in America choose to adopt children from different backgrounds and different parts of the world, I smile before answering. Because love has never been limited by geography. It has never needed matching passports, matching languages, or matching histories. Love simply asks one quiet question. Will you keep showing up? If your answer is yes, amazing things can begin. And if today's story helped you practice English while reminding you that kindness is understood in every language, then perhaps Lily's first drawing has already reached one more heart somewhere in the world. That is all for today. I will continue creating more stories like this in the future. Please subscribe so you won't miss the next one.